Alright guys, welcome back. So we are going to be looking at bag construction. Yep, bag construction. We're moving along in this project. So in video number 1, we looked at preparation and design. Okay, because we want you to be prepared to sew mentally. Okay, and then we also want you to have a vision of your project. So now we're moving on to part 2 of our video, which is construction. And we're going to be covering things like how to implement those design elements that you have already planned out. Okay, so whether it is creating a pocket, creating your own custom binding, making custom straps. I'm going to show you how to do all of those things. I'm also going to show you how to make your box bottom, okay, for your bag, and how to reinforce it. So, are you ready? Let's do this. Alright guys, we're going to get started into our bag making, and the first thing that you really want to do is to gather your materials. Now I know that I talk in my other videos about being a very organic sewer. I like to pull everything together, and then as I sew and work on my project, I kind of edit as I go. And that's fine if that's how you sew. If you like to be a more structured sewer and have exactly everything planned out, that's fine too, but the main thing you need to do is make sure you gather everything, because you don't want to be halfway through your project and be like, oh my gosh, where's my scissors, where are my pins? Okay, so the things that you're going to be looking at obviously are your fabrics. If you're going to use a stabilizer or something, or interfacing, you want to make sure you have that ready. You want to make sure you have your scissors ready, or a rotary cutter if that's what you're using. You want to make sure that you have your tape measure, or your cutting board. You want to make sure, guys, that you have your pins, whether they are straight pins or maybe you're using needles. You want to make sure essentially that everything that you could possibly need for your project is within reach, okay? Because when it's not, it's just delaying you completing your project. And the next thing that you want to do is pre-wash your fabric. Now I will say that not every fabric can be pre-washed. You're not going to pre-wash leather, and you're not going to pre-wash vinyl. But if you are using a fabric that can be pre-washed, my recommendation is to pre-wash your fabric and dry it according to the instructions that are on the bolt. And you can see a picture of a common bolt tag. Okay, it'll tell you the material that your fabric is made of and how to wash and or dry your fabric. Follow those instructions, because what's going to happen is if you do not pre-wash and pre-shrink your fabric, is you are going to create your project, and then when you go to wash it, you have an issue of your seams could pop, your fabric will wrinkle, okay, because you'll have maybe one fabric that will shrink at a different rate from another fabric. And so what you want to do is make sure you get rid of all of that shrinkage, or as much as you can, prior to starting your project. That way your fabric is kind of at its true quote-unquote size. Okay, gather your materials, pre-wash and dry your fabric, and once you have done that, if your fabric can be ironed, knock the wrinkles out, because y'all know y'all gonna get some wrinkles once you wash your fabric. Okay, so whether steam it if you want to steam it. If you don't want to put a hot iron to it, use a pressed cloth if you want to do that. But in any event, knock as many wrinkles out as you can. All right, then we're ready to go. All right, guys, patterning and cutting your fabric. You know my dude is always in the background. So first and foremost, I have to tell you that on the few occasions that I do use a pattern, and I do, guys, I tend to use shipping paper. And I get my shipping paper from Hobby Lobby in their art department. And it's normally about $5 to $6 a roll, and it can last me quite a few patterns, okay? And the great thing about using shipping paper, or the brown craft paper, if you're more familiar with that term, is that it's thick, it's hardy, guys. it will stand being poked and prodded and pinned and moved around. You can fold it up nice and neat, pack it away in storage, and then pull it out for another project. So I definitely recommend, if you're looking to make several bags to make a pattern, and use the craft paper for it. Okay, you don't have to, that's just my recommendation. Now, when you are laying out your pattern pieces, which you will eventually transfer to your fabric, the main thing that you want to make sure that you know is, one, kind of the general sizes of tote bags. Your average tote, and this is from adult to child, will range anywhere from 12 to 20 inches wide, guys. 12 to 20 inches in height and about 2 to 5 inches in depth, again depending on whether you're making something for a child or you're making something for an adult and what they're going to be carrying. Okay, if it's something that's going to have textbooks and things that are big and bulky, obviously you're going to have a deeper project. If it's something that's just maybe for folders, you don't need something that deep. Okay, so now that you have your general sizes, you're ready to measure out your pattern so you can ultimately cut your fabric. Make sure you are using a straight edge, period. If you do not own a straight edge ruler, buy one. Invest, put it in your toolkit. It is something that you will get great use out of. Okay, there are other tools that you're going to use, but in terms of the basic tools that you need, a straight edge that is truly straight, sharp scissors or a rotary cutter and mat, guys, and then also something to mark with, whether it's tailor's chalk, a pencil, a pen, whatever you might have at hand. I do not recommend using markers because that will bleed through, and we do not want to damage your fabric. So you want something that's light that can eventually wash off. Alrighty guys, making custom bag straps. Now you want to cut your fabric the length of your desired back strap plus any seam allowances. Okay, in terms of the width that you cut your fabric, it needs to be at least 4 times the finished width of your back strap. So if you desire a back strap that is 1 inch wide, you're going to cut your fabric 4 inches wide. Now take your fabric to your pressing board, and we are pressing the long sides in towards each other. Okay, fold them in and press, and then you're going to fold again across that center seam and press that down. Once you do that, you can go ahead and pin and stitch your straps. Now I do recommend that if you are using a light or medium weight fabric, that you also include a layer of interfacing in between that final fold, and that is just going to give you a nice strength to your strap. Alright, so let's say you go to the store and you cannot find the size, the color, or the pattern binding that you want to use for your project. What do? Guys, you make your own. Hello. So what we're going to do, and this is a method if you need a lot of binding. Okay, so maybe you're going to be binding quite a few pockets. Maybe you want to just do the whole project and use it as a design element. That's okay. This is how you make a longer run of binding. Okay, so you take your fabric and you want to cut it into strips. Okay, however many strips you can achieve with the amount of fabric that you're using for your project. Now the width of your fabric needs to be cut 4 times the width of your finished binding. So if you want a binding that is 1 inch wide finished width, then you need to cut your fabric into 4 inch wide strips. Okay, so 4 times the width of your finished binding. Once you have your strips cut, you're going to lay your pieces at a 90-degree angle, right side spacing, and go ahead and pin. Okay, you want to make sure you don't pin along the center, because what you're going to do is you're going to stitch at a diagonal from the top corner down to the bottom corner. And once you stitch that, you want to trim off that excess fabric and then take it to the ironing board and press that seam flat. And guys, hello, you have done the hardest part of making the binding. So from that point on, it's really just using the folding and pressing method that I showed you when we looked at making straps. And that's it. Your custom binding is done. Binding, guys, binding. So what you're going to do is you are going to take your binding, and you can see there's 4 folds in the binding. So now if you have a pre-bought bind, then you'll see that one side's a little bit thicker than the other. And so you're starting with the thinner of the 2 sides if it's store-bought. Okay, now if you made your own, then you've made them the same size. So it just depends on what you prefer. Now, you're going to take your binding and open it up. And you're going to take that top edge of your binding and line it up with the top edge of whatever you're binding. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. So you're going to line up the 2 edges, what's being bound and the binding. And go ahead and pin it. Now, once you get it all pinned, what you're going to see is that you have a small little crease, okay, because we opened it up, remember? So you have this crease, and what you're going to do is you are going to wind up sewing along that crease. And when you sew along that crease, it is obviously attaching to the back of your fabric, okay? Now, once you get all of that done, you're going to take your pins out, and then you're going to fold that binding up and over your edge, okay? And you can use pins if you want to, but you're going to fold up and over that edge, and now you're going to top stitch it down, okay? And that's it. Your binding has been secured. Alright guys, bag assembly. Now the first thing I like to do when it comes to assembling my bag is make sure any pockets that I might have are attached to the lining or to the exterior fabric, wherever the pocket might be. Now once my pockets are installed, the next thing I like to do is to lay out all of my straps, flaps, and closures to make sure that I have them in the right place, and then I pin them down. Now I like to double pin my straps. I use a lot of pins as I am assembling my bag, and I take the pins out after I have turned my bag. But I like it because it just keeps everything in place when I'm sewing, and I don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, did I run over this with the sewing machine? Do I have to take that stitch out? Everything is nice in place, lined up, pinned, and ready to go. Now, once you do that, you definitely want to make sure that you reinforce your straps. Now, I typically sew my straps in at least 3 different places. I reinforce them after I have them pinned, and then I stitch them together when I put the bag together, and then I top stitch over top of that, reinforcing it a 3rd time after I have completely put the whole bag together. So make sure your straps are in the right place and they are as secure as possible. Now once your straps are done and your pockets are done, the next thing you really want to do is go ahead and sew down the sides of your lining and the side of your exterior fabric. Now if it's a bag that has a dedicated lining, I like to leave my openings on the side of the lining, okay? And if it's a bag that's like reversible, then you would leave your opening across the top, okay? And we'll talk about that later. Now once you have sewn down the sides of your lining and the sides of your bag, and you know the dude is always with me, you want to sew across the bottom of your fabric if you've used 2 different pieces to construct your bag. If your bottom was placed on the fold, then you can skip this step. Now in the next section, we'll look at how do we take that little L shape and actually create the box bottom. So the next thing you want to do is assemble your layers, your lining fabric and your exterior bag fabric. Now, I put my exterior fabric with the right sides facing inward, and I take my lining fabric with the right sides facing outward, and I sandwich them together. Now, once you sandwich them, you want to make sure your side seams line up and your straps line up, and any closures that you have are lined up appropriately. Pin it across the top, and then you're going to go ahead and stitch around the top all the way around and close that up. Now, this is assuming that you've left the opening on the side of the lining. But once you have it pinned and sewed across the top, guys, we're ready to move to the next step. All right? Sewing and reinforcing bag bottoms. All right, so when you go, again, first time I saw a kind of like pattern, I couldn't figure out how in the world does that V shape make your base, and it's super easy, guys. So bring your hand into your bag. Bring your hand into your bag. Okay. Whatever your midpoint is for your base, now because I sewed two pieces together, I know my midpoint is right here. And then the midpoint of your seams. You want to bring those together so they meet. So they meet. Okay. And stitch across. It's that easy. Now, that is sewn. You can see it is stitched. What I'm going to do is flip my bag around and stitch back down. I'm going to make a couple passes just to make sure the base is reinforced. Okay. Alright guys, so how do we get a firm box bottom for your tote? Now there are a lot of different ways that you can do. You can get like plastic inserts for the base of your tote, but what if you can't find that product? So I'm going to show you how I do a sturdy base bottom, a sturdier than normal box bottom base for my tote. And really the answer is stabilizer. Okay, so if you're in an area and you don't necessarily have the most expansive fabric store, and you can use stabilizer for your base, and that's what's inside of this, which is holding this up. Stabilizer comes in a lot of different thickness, and this is a medium weight stabilizer. Okay, now you can get the thicker weight, but if your store doesn't have it, don't fret. A medium weight stabilizer will work. Take it, depending on how sturdy you want your base to be, double it or triple it. Now, for this particular bag, I actually attach my stabilizer to the lining. Okay, so that's what's making it stand up. And so that crisscross X keeps the stabilizer stable. Imagine that. Okay, but essentially this is just triple folded medium weight stabilizer in the bottom, so secured on with the X. It's on the inside, so you really won't notice it. And that's it. And that is going to give you just a nice little bit of stability in the base of your bag. And you would attach it, okay, before you attach your sides together. Got it? Bag turning. What? Yes, bag turning. Now, when you sew your bags, remember we have the right sides are facing, which means the wrong side is what you're seeing, okay, as you sew. So we need to get that bag so that the right side is shown, okay? So we turn that bag right side out. Well, how do we do it? Really simple. If you have a bag that has a dedicated lining, you want to leave an opening in the side of the lining. You can leave it also in the bottom. I typically leave mine in the side. You want to make sure that that opening is wide enough to fit your hand in. So don't make a little 2-inch opening, guys. You want that opening to be minimum 3 to 4 inches, okay? Because you really want to be able to fit your hand in order to pull the fabric out and turn the bag. Now this is assuming you're doing a larger bag, okay, like a purse or a tote. Now if you have a bag that does not have a lining, like a reversible bag, what do? I typically will leave the opening across the top of the bag on the back side. Now, some bags might not have a back side. Well, to me, the back side is whichever side is the most plain. Okay? So, if you have a bag that does not have a dedicated lining, leave your opening across the top on the most plain side. If your bag has a lining, leave the opening on the side of the lining, but make sure that that opening is wide enough for your hand to fit through. And what you're going to do is you will come back once your bag is turned and you will sew the openings closed, okay? Make sure you use a matching thread so it kind of just blends in very smoothly. And that's it. Oh, see? Another one. So, another pin. Slowly but surely, it's coming through. Be gentle. Take your time. And not just because of the pins.